Good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Futsal868 Corner Talks. I'm your host, Geoffrey Edwards, President of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago. In this episode 71, we speak sports and education, something very close to my heart. You may ask why? That's because my father, who spent 30 years at one school, Marlborough Boys Anglican, the school I also attended in terms of primary school, spent 30 years as a physical education teacher, dedicated to the cause. His credo: we have to build mind, body, and soul. If you neglect one, all fall down. And that's how he grew his children as well. And we are blessed to be able to have him be a part of our life and still adding value to us. With this being said, this is very important in terms of what's happening. The education system, given the pandemic, is one of the industries that is being affected by today. And with us, joining us to speak on this beautiful topic, sport and education, is sport a part of education? Even though I spoke so highly about it through my dad, we are joined by two great, I call them brothers, and I get this word brother from the first one I'm going to introduce, Brother Atto Rockcliffe. It's a very interesting, you have to always take the good from people and add value with it, and so I was saying Brother Atto Rockcliffe, and he put me on to this gentleman, Dr. Marlon Melville. Both individuals are part of the University of Trinidad and Tobago Faculty of Kinesiology. Gentlemen, did I get it right? Kinesiology, yes?
That would work.
Thank you. That would work. Thank you very much for being a part of. Let me just fix this one time. Let me put the guests on top and I below. Thank you very much for being a part of this program. As I started off, sports in education, sport and education, sport education. Very important, close to my heart. Gentlemen, your opening remarks as regards to sport and education. I start with Dr. Melville.
Okay, good afternoon to everyone on the panel, and good afternoon to the live audience as well. Before I start, I want to bring greetings on behalf of the Center for Kinesiology and Sports. In no way that I am speaking for and on behalf of the Center for Kinesiology, however, but I'm speaking as a member of the Center for Kinesiology and Sports. So we really thank you for inviting us to share this platform with you, and I imagine your guests. So sport and education. As far back as interrogating the literature, I've seen in the days of Plato, Aristotle, coming way up to the Roman days, Renaissance days, and whatever. So way back, there was and which still exists today, a belief that there's some synergy that should exist between sport and education, right? The two competing philosophy in those days really looked like this, at least based on my understanding of the literature. Sport by itself was and is a virtuous activity, in that if individuals participate in sport in and by itself, it can bring some kind of virtuous quality, or whatever the case may be. And when I say virtuous quality, I'm talking about some intrinsic and visceral values. I believe that Plato and Aristotle and these guys, and what they were really talking about, if they had the access of fMRI and MRI scan. What I think they were really talking about at that is when we participate in sport, the sort of neuromodulators that flow throughout our body that makes us feel good. So participating in sport, right? And we could pull on the threads of sport, whether we're talking about sport, physical education, physical activity, um, exercise or what have you. In and by itself, participating in those types of activity makes you feel good. So it's a virtuous activity to take part. The other competing philosophy, at least based on my understanding and reading of the literature, is that sport, there's a means to some end in participating in sport. What do I mean by that? If we participate in sport, it can produce some external benefits. For example, if you were to go cognitive, if you were to go emotional, if you were to go social or what have you, and we know about all the different organizations and they who support and are adherents and proponents for that particular philosophy. So again, as I peruse the literature, sport and education, it has always been there, and the two philosophy that really drive that commingling between sport and sport and education really is it's a valuable pursuit. And the other one, if I participate in sport, there's some external something that can be gained. And we could go back to the sustainable goals or what have you. And I guess those things, those conversations could come out later on. But that's my opening salvos.
But Arto, your opening remarks?
Wonderful. Thank you, my dear brother, for inviting me again. It's always a pleasure to be in dialogue with my brother, Dr. Melville. It's always a pleasure to be in dialogue with you. I want to, it is difficult to articulate any better the value of sport in education than Dr. Melville did, but I will give it a shot nevertheless, because that is the culture that we have between ourselves. We always challenge each other, even when we agree to articulate things differently. So, like Dr. Melville, I'm a big fan of history and philosophy. So, from the days of Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they have recognized the virtue, as Dr. Melville invoked that word virtue, of participating in sport. Dr. Melville quite rightly invoked Plato, and Plato talks about the tripartite soul, and tripartite soul is the physical, the emotional, and the rational. And they, in that epoch, they believe that sport is one of the things that contribute to all three levels. So much so that in that epoch, in their academy, I think Plato was the Lyceum and Aristotle the academy, they spoke about the philosophy of education in that epoch was paideia. And paideia is about deep education, as Brother Cornel West would say, deep education, not cheap schooling. And there's some fundamental things that must be involved in deep education. In this epoch, there are people like Howard Gardner and others who speaks about the same thing, that concept of deep education in different words, but they speak about the importance of having or summoning the multiple intelligent values or the multiple intelligent substance that people need to develop. And I think sport does that beautifully. I would make an argument for things like music and art as well. But the difference and the advantage that sport has over music touch your soul. Bob Marley said, when the brilliant thing about music, when it hits you, you feel no pain. But it does not necessarily create that holistic jolting of the mind, body, and soul the way sports does. But I will still make an argument for music because, like you, my father is a musician, a lifelong musician. I grew up in the culture of music. And if we dance the music, and dance is an aspect of sport as well, we can get some of that same value. So, to summarize, I would say there's a symbiotic relationship. How we manage that relationship and how we create an environment to ensure that we derive the most benefits from that relationship is what people like us in fora like this need to interrogate.
Holistic, symbiotic, jolting, mind, body, and soul, and Aristotle. What great opening remarks, gentlemen. Which leads me down this rabbit hole. And we're going to start from bottom up. We're going to start with preschool and primary school, right? We're going to start with the Ministry of Education and how is sport seen in the Ministry of Education from the preschool, primary school, and let's add the secondary school. We wouldn't touch it tertiary just yet. But gentlemen, you all spoke to Aristotle, but let's jump to 2021, where the educational system has been challenged by an invisible weapon, by an invisible agent, by an invisible force that is known as the COVID-19 pandemic. It has resulted in students being locked away from school until recently, and even to the point whereby there is no physical interaction, i.e., sport involvement. How are we now to be able to see this jolting? I love it. This jolting of mind, body, and soul, given our present scenario. And additionally, what do you think the Ministry of Education can do to be able to assist in leveling that playing field, or shall I say, creating a new playing field?
You can attempt at this. Thank you. So, Brother Edwards, Brother Edwards, right? Right. This question and this issue is problematic, and it's not unique to the walls of Trinidad and Tobago. Counties, countries, and different areas, and they fight for and lobby really feverishly for our subject area because they understand and appreciate what, and I guess this is what Brother Atto was talking about, when sport and physical education, its purpose, the possible holistic value that it could bring to, and I'm talking in the immediate setting of education in the classroom, and we could go one step beyond that in terms of how we emotionally interact with ourselves and others. I could go one step beyond that, how possibly that could affect crime or what have you. I could go one step beyond that in terms of individuals and then know how to interact with other people of different race or whatever the case may be. So the problem is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago. It happens, I would imagine, without interrogating the Caribbean literature, because I don't think that I'm privy to that, but interrogating some of the international literature, I could tell you with some certainty that places like, America and Canada and what have you, they struggle on that particular question also. As it relates to our own situation, Brother Edwards, I think one of the things that we suffer from, right, and this is very close to my heart, right? What we suffer from is believing that there is a one-on-one nexus and relationship or positive relationship between participating in sports and it's going to bring some kind of salutary outcomes. That is not true. That is not false. Sorry, that is not true. That is not correct, however. What we need to do, and this is the part that is very close to my heart, and this is what other territories and they have used in order to lobby and persuade and get more support for their physical education and sport programs in the school or wherever. They have rigid and rigorous data to support the position and the reason for sport within the education system or whatever. And our system really suffer, and I may also prefer to say it probably happened across other forms and levels and tiers of the education system, but I could speak specifically for physical education because I was a physical education for 3 years. I interact with physical education teachers, so I have some idea what have you. We really suffer from physical education and sport in having data. And I could go deeper than that. I'm not just talking about descriptive data that we could take two variables and analyze it and say one is related to the other or what have you. There's some relation. I'm talking about setting up data and doing long-term longitudinal study that says, look, I am aiming to facilitate and acquire certain constructs in the environment. Maybe it could be self-esteem, it could be self-confidence, however the case may. And we are going to plan, right, strong, rigorous experimental research, getting into the environment and see that after a year, 2 or 3 years, maybe targeting at-risk schools also within the education system, that after having this thing plan, organized, implemented, and have a holistic program, this word is coming up again. And when I say a holistic program, it had to be well planned. We had to have good actors who are able to implement. You have to have good actors who are able to cull the data and analyze the data or whatever. And then we need to have actors or whatever who are able to speak to what we're seeing or whatever the case may be. So all those factors coming and merging together will help us in our own scenario, and I could say with some confidence also external to our situation in Trinidad and Tobago, that other programs internationally use strong, rigid data in order to support the expansion of physical education and sports in the environment. And what we who are involved in the subject area knows what it can do. And to the individual, and external to the individual, and if you want to go, how it affects individual emotionally and socially, whatever, we could have that conversation also. I thank you for the question.
But I don't jump in just yet, because I like when it is we speak about data and the collection of data. We're supposed to be a data-driven society. We're supposed to be able to have such to guide us accordingly. So let me speak from the heart as regards to my data. Prince Albert Churchill Edwards Sr., 1980 to 2010, physical education teacher at Marbella Boys Anglican School. Would have interacted over those 30 years, would have interacted with thousands of children from all areas of Marbella, including the train line, the what some people may call the infamous train line. But he also had children, including Don Miguel Polo, who is now the commander-in-chief of the Coast Guard, as one of his students. And we could go on in terms of many success stories that far outweighs the ones that fell through the cracks. That's my data, where sport and spiritual intervention assisted one of the very few teachers from both the Anglican and the government school who could have gone down the train line in the heat of and do things that even police officers could not have done. Let's go a little bit closer. In my time of doing common entrance in Standard 5, my teacher then told my dad, the boy playing too much sports.
Yeah.
We're going to play a football match, and she said, I'm not letting him go. And he turned to her and he said, I am both his physical education teacher and his parent.
Nice.
Let him come. I pass with my first choice. I'm saying what to say, gentlemen, is that we now have an issue of parents. Let's speak parents.
Oh.
Yes?
Yeah.
Because we have moved from common entrance to SCA. We have now we have CAPE, we have CSEC. And a lot of parents are literally saying, my child is not going to play sport leading up to. My child should not get involved in. So, with all of this data that you're speaking to, one of the main stakeholders that we have to influence are parents. We'll come back to teachers just now. How are we going to influence parents when it comes to sport and education? For that too.
All right. I forgot to give my usual disclaimer that I'm not representing anyone but myself. And I feel that that's often necessary because I'm a polemicist and I can be contentious at times. Um, I believe in order to convince parents that it is wise to spend time and energy engaging in physical education, you have to convince parents that it is good for their children. And although I appreciate and I value tremendously the anecdotes that you shared, I will have to lean again in support of Dr. Melville's notion of ensuring that the empiricism is strong to make the case. A famous psychologist from Harvard, Stephen Pinkett, he says, when asked, I'm paraphrasing him, of course, but he was asked what is one thing he would change about the world and why. He says, too many influential people, including politicians, are swayed by anecdotes and hyperbole instead of data and facts. So one of the things we need to do, and it's something we are exploring at the Academy of Sport, and there's where I'm confusing myself. I'm saying I'm not representing anyone, but I'm still sharing this. It's something we're exploring at the Center for Kinesiology, Physical Education, and Sport, is trying to figure out how we can secure a pilot project in a couple of schools to start to build the case to provide some what we might call a proof of concept that there are benefits to be derived from a robust, properly structured physical education intervention that will connect with some of the things the parents currently value. Parents currently value things like going to a quote unquote first choice. They currently value ensuring that their children is grounded in a robust education. But unfortunately, our society has misdefined what a quality education looks like. We are no longer talking about that paideia sort of education. We are only looking at two intelligences, if we want to use the MI notion of multiple intelligences, logical and linguistic. But there is evidence that we can lean on that provides a strong case for the importance of physical education and sport. And I will end with this to the parents. So I'm speaking directly to the parents now. I am not aware of, I'm not aware of it. It may exist, but I'm not aware of a child or a person dying or getting sick as a result of their lack of ability to complete a simultaneous equation or to write a complex sentence. But the evidence is overwhelming when we neglect physical activity and healthy lifestyles. The quality of life of our children from a physical standpoint can suffer tremendously. So hopefully we can redefine how we understand a good education.
Ay, ay, ay.
Dr.
Doctor,
Melville, you're muted. You're muted, Doc.
Doc, go ahead. You go
Good,
ahead,
you're
Doc.
good
Go
now.
ahead. You go ahead, Doc.
I apologize.
No, that's all right, my brother. You go ahead because I realize it. You want to
Sometimes,
jump in. I like when it answer to after. I love when things flow in because what's gonna you see he talk about parents, right? Dr. Melvin, you go ahead. You talk your talk about
so let's get a quick preamble. So sometimes what happens, the thoughts come to my whiteboard very quickly, and if I don't take that off my whiteboard, it disappears quickly. So have I have to explicate it quick. So I'm sorry, right? I'm quite sorry, right? So this could be quite controversial also, or it may not be, and you all may disagree also, but I in support, or your audience may disagree as well. But it is a fact that sport can act as a distraction in the education system as also. So there's this belief, right? And it's sort of filtered down to a different philosophy of sport and physics, that sports build character. There's this thing that once you participate in sports, there's some, again, salutary benefits or whatever, but it's a good planned, and to pull on Brother Ato's word, quality physical education and sport that can give you the kind of outcomes that is required. Or what, for example, i.e. Mr. Edward Senior, i.e. maybe my physical education teacher, i.e. and other people, whoever the case may be. So yes, it can, but is the type and quality of physical education. Let me give you an example. We know across the world in sports that some individuals are attracted to sports, senior adults, however, so that they could prey on younger people. There's strong evidence for that as well. So we know there is no one-on-one relations, is the quality of the physical education and sport. And that is a fact. And that is what we try to do at the Center of Kinesiology and Sport. And I don't speak on behalf of them. I speak as a member of the Kinesiology department.
But you're quite correct because sorry, Brother Atu, you're quite correct because sport development is supposed to be inherently for the good, but there are negative aspects of it. We will not go into that because we have spoken to that before. But in staying on course as regards to sport and education, what brings me next, and when you're speaking about data, the next actors in the conversation would be the teachers and their employees and their employers, sorry, being the Ministry of Education. How do we now encourage teachers and by extension the Ministry of Education to be more involved in that particular aspect of the student? Because you said something very, very correctly, Dr. Melville, that sport can be seen as a distraction. There are many teachers who say it because in the first term you have football as the main sport. In the second term you have to deal with multiple sport, athletics, netball, cricket. Yes, and by the time it blink is the third term, which is fragmented for those who have to do exams. So a lot of teachers are saying, "Here we're going on now. You're only wasting my time. I didn't come here. I didn't come here to engage in physical component. I came here to engage in mental component. I came here as a teacher. This is what I went to teachers college for. This is what I have a degree for." Brother Ato, talk to me as regards to those two actors, the teachers and the employer, the Ministry of Education.
All right. So I'm not sure that I'm going to take a linear or chronological view, but I'm going to attempt to do justice to this notion. So these people are voters because the Plato talks about the importance of politics, and politics is the way we order our society. All right? So the politicians will do what is popular, what is going to get them votes. It is unfortunate, but most times that is what happens. So if they are convinced that the voters will be in support of a transformed education system, then they will put the systems or the resources, the policies, and so on in place for us to transform the current education system. The responses you get from teachers, the reaction you get from teachers and parents, etc., is in response of what currently exists. And I fundamentally believe what currently exists is not serving us well anymore. Even if it did before, it's not serving us well anymore. Social change has occurred. People were engaging in more physical activities before by a matter of necessity. They couldn't help it. 60 years ago, you had to walk a little more, there were less cars available. You had to wash differently because there were less machines. Washing machines were not necessarily available. You had to go farther for water. All these things were physical activity by necessity. In this epoch, we don't have that need, that compulsion to physical activity. So I am recommending that the ministry fund a pilot project starting from early childhood education and primary schools all the way to secondary schools. We can't transform a system based on extra context data, and there's a lot of extra context data, and I will share some of that as we move forward. Professor Ratti from Harvard University, Spark program, etc. But we need to do context-specific data. So we need to plan a strategy based on the theory and evidence available, design a program, get somebody to fund the implementation of this program where we can get children doing physical activity from ECC to secondary schools as a mandatory subject, and not mandatory the way, because there are 94% of countries in the world have mandatory physical education, but it's only implemented or signed on to claim they have mandatory physical education, but only 54% of them do it well. And what I'm seeing in the data is that there's an association between some of the healthiest countries in the world and quality implementation of mandatory physical activity. So we don't know if there's a causal relationship. We don't know the explainability, how much that particular variable of physical education explains in terms of the result of health, but there is an association. So what I am passionate about, and I'm trying to encourage my colleagues at the academy to do, is for us to invest some time, build a solid program, shop that program around to get people to fund it, and then collect relevant data so that we can make an argument to convince the stakeholders that we need to change. So if it works well in a small amount of schools, we can expand it to a district, and then it may catch on, and we transform our education system to an education system that serves our children and our country well.
Watch me about that to the chat going crazy. As you could see, people saying very good points. But to Nicole Paris, also mandatory physical activity across the educational system. I want to say thank you very much, Nicole Paris, and also Catherine John, who would have just said second that, Mr. Atto. I just want to also bring in Mr. Bernard Charles, who would have said the principal can positively influence the teachers as well as the parents. The principal must know what constitutes a physically educated child, my apologies, and how that can positively impact the end result. To all those persons who are contributing to the chat, I want to say thank you very much and continue to do such as we look at sport and education. But before we continue, Dr. Melville, I know your RAM space. I want to make sure you have enough space in that RAM. So let it out. Talk to me. Talk to me. I had the same problem, and I always have people in my RAM space. I limit it. I can't deal with drama. I want to make sure I'm positive in my and that I have enough RAM space. I don't want to be defragging. My defragging happen in playing football or with family, or saying a little prayer. You know what I'm saying? So talk to me, Dr. Melville.
So I will leave the computer jargon for you. And I'll go back to the whiteboard. My whiteboard fall off very quickly. And erases very quickly also. But I'm sorry if I'm going to song, like if I'm going to beat a drum and I'm going to beat at the same time, the next day and the next day and the next day for the same amount of hours, maybe with the same individual. Because it really starts in my mind, right? I'm not saying I'm correct, but it started in my mind with data, Cause your question was to me, how can we convince the educators, the actors, or whatever the case may be? It really starts with providing some quality data that it could reach the right ears and the policy makers that they said that this thing really makes sense, that we could utilize it in order to foster change. Yesterday, I was talking to our leader. Maybe sometime you'll get an opportunity to interact with him, Assistant Professor Dr. Dalloway, and we were having a conversation. Same thing Brother Atto was talking about in going big. What do I mean by going big? We really have to, beyond our teaching responsibility, which we have, providing service like this, which we do, but we need to go big to see as a university how we could engineer change. And in my humble view, in our small unit at the Center of Kinesiology and Sport, we have the capacity, we have the interest and the motivation in order to go big. So I was talking to my leader yesterday, and we're really thinking about, and tomorrow we have a meeting and we're going to have this conversation after the meeting also, how we can organize to get into the ministry, and Brother Atto is on that particular lane as well, how we could negotiate, because recently we made some connection with Olympic Committee and the Ministry of Education and some of these actors who might be able, Brother Atto was talking about support, funding and what have you. It's good to get these people and to buy in terms of, because these things on them can be expensive and we need other actors on them to come on board to support or whatever. But how can we address, and whatever external construct we could, it could be from a cognitive perspective, it could be more, but whatever outcomes, construct or whatever that we want to identify, because we believe those constructs could have and support a better population or whatever, and then devise the program in order to track these particular concepts over a period of time. So again, for me, not to sound kind of hackneyed or whatever, it really starts with the data, and that is what one of our major pillars at the center, and again, I'm not speaking for them, but one of our major pillar is really research, right? Because we have the capacity and we know that is the way to go.
We're speaking about data. Would it be both recreational sport in schools as well as competitive?
Yeah. So recreational sports have a certain particular outcome. I guess that is what you are talking about. And high performance sports have some particular, but they both have to be properly planned for. They both have to be properly planned for in order to get a particular outcome. So we don't want an athlete who is representing Trinidad and Tobago and he can run quickly, but he doesn't have the psychosocial skills to interact with individuals right? Or in the other sense, we looking at recreation or whatever the case may be, and they just participate and they do have the psychosocial skills in order to interact and be competent in the environment. So for me, whilst the external goals, while we may have one or two focused goals at the end of those two particular pillars, and there are a number of similar concepts and goals that must be infused in both programs. So high performance, wherever you still want somebody who could interact and know about themselves, self-awareness and what have you, Edwards. So it's both pillars I do speak to.
But Atto, look at this comment from Mr. Dunstan Williams, who is the assistant head coach at the reigning National Secondary Schools Football League Intercol Champions, Presentation College, San Fernando. #PTBP, proud to be Prez. Yes. That's us. He says, "Good day, great discussion. In relation to convincing parents, teachers, we are always reminded that physical education, sport, is an extracurricular activity. Extracurricular activity.
I-
Participation and involvement in sport
Could I
is
chime in here quickly? My whiteboard will be raised very quickly.
like Dr. Ato, your whiteboard. Let's post plenty more than Dr. Melville, boy.
But I'm too accustomed with my mind now, so
Go ahead.
he's
You
quite
know what I'm talking about.
he's quite comfortable at this point in time, Jeffrey. I believe, and I could stand corrected because I'm no longer in that area of the Ministry of Education, what have you. But I don't think physical education is an extracurricular activity. Maybe sport can be considered an extracurricular activity. I think physical education and sport, especially at the secondary school, right, and it goes up to A levels also, is a mandatory subject. In some cases, I think it's up to Form 3. We could have some conversation as to how we could go with that in order convincing individuals to go straight up to 5 or what have you. But and then it goes to A levels, yeah. So I think as it relates to physical education and sport, physical education, that's mandatory. It's not mandatory at the primary school, and sport could be considered a extracurricular activity, and I could stand corrected as well.
So it's not mandatory in primary school.
No, it's not.
So
No.
isn't that
So
is it? But to go ahead, and I think that is probably also.
so that is that is what I want to speak to, and I was saying that I believe, and I can be very wrong, and the only way we'll know that is if we design a program, implement the program, and analyze the results of the program, right? But let me answer the question first. Yes, sport is an extracurricular activity. Physical education is compulsory up to third form, as best as I remember. And I was fortunate enough to do some research in both primary and secondary schools, trying to understand the state of physical education. It was a smaller piece of research, and it was really around an opportunity to make recommendations on how to provide some resources, meaning sporting equipment and so on, to these schools, both primary and secondary. So I know somebody made the point earlier, the principals are instrumental in causing or promoting that culture of valuing physical education. That is very true. In the schools where the principals were passionate and were believers in physical education, they had a stronger physical education program. In the schools where they were not, the program was weak because the principal is in charge of the bureaucracy at the school. So that matters. But I want to get back to a couple of things. One, this is normal between Dr. Melville and I, so this is nothing new. I want to speak to he said that these things can be expensive, so we need funding partners. And it may be semantics, but I believe it's important, and he would appreciate this as a psychologist himself. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but he's a psychologist, and we often interact, and he tutors me on these things pertinent to psychology. I would prefer to use the word or the words investment is required. Expensive has a connotation that it may not, it's not worth the amount per se. That's not what it means, but it connotes that. And this is why it's not expensive. There is research done in 2017 by John Hopkins University, and they found, I made a note, 25 minutes of physical activity 3 times per week would change the amount of physical activity that is taking place from 32% to 50%. And that change would cause a savings of $21.9 billion in medical costs and loss of wages over the lifespan of children the age between 8 and 11. What does this mean? Because sometimes people have a difficulty interpreting what research findings mean. It means that right now, among children between 8 and 11, well, right now, no, in 2017, there was only 32% of participation at this level of 25 minutes per day for 3 days a week, which is significantly less than the internationally recommended amount of time students should be engaged in physical activity, right? And just by having a 18% increase from 32 to 50, so they're still not participating fully, but just better rate of participation could save the economy $21.9 billion. And that is just looking at children between 8 and 11 years old. So, what am I saying by sharing that is I'm trying to add support to my notion that investment in physical education, a proper physical education system, which is implemented in a context of a reimagined education system in the first place, one that is that subscribes to a liberating curriculum and a liberating pedagogy instead of this banking method that we use in our primary school system, where we're trying to get children to remember and regurgitate some things and only assessing two things primarily, their logical intelligence and their linguistic intelligence. If we can reimagine an education system that tries to, again, I'll beat the drum like Dr. Melville, tries to look at the philosophy of paideia, trying to educate and prepare the entire child to deal with the vicissitudes of real life, spiritual enrichment, and I'm not talking religion, spiritual enrichment, existential enrichment, um, uh, uh, physical enrichment, of course, intellectual enrichment, but that goes without saying because our society is obsessed with producing lawyers and doctors and scientists, and we lose sight of the importance of the mechanics, the plumbers, the physical education teachers, the athletes, those are not desirable things. If you grow up to become a successful plumber, your parents don't necessarily boast about their son that is the number one plumber in the world. But you might be number 100 lawyer in the country and your parents happy and ecstatic. We need to reimagine. So in philosophy, there's something called value theory. So we need to connect with a different set of values and reimagine a world where we understand the importance of different social actors. Lawyers and doctors are extremely important. So are teachers, so are plumbers, so are minibus drivers, so are. So that is what I would say to that notion.
Gentlemen, it is 49 minutes. Before this session, I watched the Liverpool versus West Ham game, whereby the first half was exactly 49 minutes. We reached the end of our first half. I'm blowing my whistle. And after the break, we are going to go into tertiary education. We are going to answer a few questions that have been posed by our viewers. I want to say thank you very much. For those who are now joining us, what an exciting first half it has been. Watch me as a battle between these two great teams. I want to say we are watching Futsal868 Corner Talks, sport and education. The first in our sport and series for this month of November. We'll be right back. Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Please do. Why? This is why.
Storyblocks Audio.
And I forget Instagram, because we have very cool prizes as well, whereby just look at some of the persons who would have won our recently concluded cancer awareness with cotton ground spa. I heard it was amazing. I wish I could get a massage too, but it's for the ladies. Ladies, thank you very much for being a part of it. So we are back, and we want to say thank you very much for those who took the time to, stay with us. To our brother, to our both brothers, Dr. Melville and also Brother Atto. Before we left to have the break, there was an interesting question that came from Colleen Walton, who asks, what percentage of the overall CAPE or CSEC student body per annum pursue and are successful in their pursuit of delving more into knowing about their body, mind, and spirit? What a question. It's interesting that you should see the YouTube conversation going on. I'll just go on with it. And afterwards, you had Catherine John, who said, but most offer it at CSEC. Colin Walton then replied, we are aware of 41% of persons passing math. What's the percentage of persons passing PE? Things getting heated. Itania joins it. Yasmin joins in and said, Colin, you are so correct. So much analysis of results of English and math among others. I am yet to see anything with physical education and sport. Lastly, before we continue the conversation, gentlemen, do we have capable, qualified professionals to teach physical education or CAPE level? Watch me now, the thing going heated. Guys, just continue to flood it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's powerful to say the least. Brother, I told you, things just bubbling. Things bubbling. Right now, we have a serious Sunday soup bubbling right here now. But nevertheless, I want to delve into the student athlete. I really want to delve into the student athlete. And then I also want to deal with the curriculum. When it comes to, we know the curriculum in education when it comes to the CAPE, CSEC, as well as tertiary options. So let's start with student athlete. Can we speak to sport education and the student athlete? Gentlemen.
Dr. Melville, do you want to take this, or do you want me to make an attempt? You're muted.
Yeah. Go ahead, Atto.
All right. So I appreciate the question, and thank you for the people that are engaging in conversation. That is very important. Part of the problem, I think, with our society is academics, of which I'm not one of those. I'm not an academic. I'm a Rasta man that I'm lucky enough to teach some courses at a university. But academics feel that they have a monopoly on knowledge and don't interact enough with the brothers and sisters around on the ground. Some academics, that's unfair to generalize that notion. But to answer the specific question about sport and education and athletes at the university level, we have a couple of fundamental problems. One, we're trying to build the house, or we're trying to address the flaws in a built house from the finishing. At the ECCE level, at the primary school level, at the secondary school level, we have an overall challenged education system. And is this hyperbolic on my part? Maybe. But when I say challenge, what do I mean? I mean that this education system was conceived of in a time when the world was a very different place. And I'm not au fait enough with the data and the studies pertinent to what were the benefits of that education system for that epoch. But we're in a different epoch now. And the environment, the circumstances of this epoch demands that we reconstitute our education systems. So although that we would like to look at what is going on at the university, the tertiary level, it is difficult to do so. It's difficult to do so well because the research suggests that one of the reasons the main reason people go to university to pursue university education is to get a better job when they graduate. And that motivation of getting a better job can have an impact, and Dr. Melville may be able to speak to this better than I can, on the quality of their academic performance. It may impact the quality of their athletic performance as well. And if there are not enough meaningful opportunities out there, their quality of motivation will be diminished even while pursuing their university education. In other words, the environment post-university is not appropriate to give them the kind of opportunities that they need. Hence, their performance during university can be affected significantly because of external motivational factors. And I can speak to this a little bit because in my own research, I found that a tremendous amount of our students that graduated, those that are employed, are often underemployed, and even the ones that are employed, the majority of them are employed in industries outside of sport. Police officers, fire, working in a store, beautiful professions, wonderful. But if that is what they were aiming for, university education, a degree in kinesiology, a degree in sports studies, may not have necessarily been their first choice. So what I'm saying is, in order for us to address the windows and the tiling and the aesthetics of finishing the house, we may need to go all the way back to changing the environment around the value we placed on holistic development, the value we placed around ensuring that students are exposed to a good experience of physical literacy, physical education, physical activity, and sport, and ensuring that and if we do that, we create another market for people to be involved in sports at that level. Jobs, hundreds of jobs will be created automatically. And is this extra money, extra burden on our society? The data is clear. Although it's extra context data, it is clear. No. I think I saw, I don't remember, but I don't remember the precise amount. But there was some economist that did a study that suggested every dollar you spend on sport, you're actually saving about $3 or something like that. I don't remember the specific context nor the economist. So let's not take that too seriously, because as in this context, we want to be sharing information that people can verify. They can go look it up and check it out.
So,
Dr. Melvin, I don't want to address that point just yet. I want to go into the fact that, to spin off of Brother Atto, where we have a situation, the University of West Indies, they have an undergrad program in terms of sport. I'm talking about sport-related studies. That's main campus. There is a postgrad diploma where FIFA, CIES, facilitated by University of West Indies. There is a master's program in terms of the University of West Indies open campus. There is a bachelor's program. UTT have programs in sports as well. So we are not short in terms of educational output and input when it comes from a tertiary level standpoint. But yet we find ourselves in a dire situation when it comes to the effective and efficient execution of sport at all levels. This is show sport and education. What is happening? Where are we falling short?
So, Mr. Edwards, I will first proffer a response by stating that we don't have the empirical, in my humble view, and I haven't seen it, the empirical data to give us the answers to your question. So what I will be proffering is anecdotally what I believe possibly might be happening, and maybe try to make a connection with what I think or I see happening when some of our students and they graduate or what have you, right? In terms of my own view, right, and I'm seeing that I could be quite incorrect here. I have found mainly by conversation, and I'm just trying to toggle and wiggle my way and be mindful of how I'm seeing and how it would come across. I believe at times that, okay, let me bring it in. Sports and performance psychology plays a major role on performance, especially on the day when it happens most. If we don't have individuals and they who are able to control the mind is like the driver of the bus. If you cannot drive, you're not going to sit down in a plane without a pilot and take you from Trinidad to Tobago or wherever, or from Tobago to America or wherever. You want to know that you have a pilot, not only that you have a pilot, but you have a pilot who has the KSAs in order to fly that plane from Trinidad to America or wherever the case may be. So I believe in many cases, and I'm using a specific area related to kinesiology, I believe there may be, and again, I don't have the data, I'm just talking anecdotally here. In some cases, I believe that we may not have, right, those type of quality people, and they might be existing in the environment. I could be wrong, and people might be able to point out that to me or whatever, and I'm open for correction as well, right? So I also believe that recently, especially at the advent of UTT, I can speak to UTT to a little bit. I've been at UTT for the past 6 years. I know over the past 6, and even before that, we have been churning out graduates in different areas. And today, you will see a number of our graduates, and they holding down, I would call it critical positions and the important positions, and they right in those environments, head coaches and strength and conditioning coaches and what have you in particular areas, both locally and nationally. The thing about it, Edward, is after our graduates go out to the external market and hopefully apply what they learned, within those markets or whatever, and there's a learning curve there. And the learning curve could be steeper for different individuals. And do we have the interest, the motivation, and the capacity to go out there and find out what is happening in terms of the application of principles learned within the university or whatever the case may be? So that's one part of the answer. I believe one, competent people and there many years, whatever the case may, and then the other issue is that our graduates, how they are doing it, I don't have the data. In addition to that, I also believe that our graduates, and because Trinidad and Tobago the market could be quite saturated, right, in terms of positions that are vacant and the number of individuals that we are churning out and from year to year, what have you. So there is an issue with a number of our graduates and them who we believe might have the competence in order to make these changes that we're talking about, having problems with finding positions, right? Brother Atto I'm putting in a plug for my dear brother here also his PhD dissertation. I can't wait for him to present and put it out or whatever. Really deals with many aspects, but one thing it deals with graduateness and how one aspect is where are our graduates and they in terms of the external market, how they feel, job satisfaction or what have you, right? That is one, and I guess other aspects on this. So another issue with professionals and adherents in our market is finding positions within the external market in order to implement their skills and finding ways to negotiate with that could be difficult because sometimes if we don't have the right mindset, an individual could be seen as a threat versus a support, right? Is according to the mindset that you have. So somebody may be higher, they come in the environment, they're younger, they have fresh ideas. Somebody who is skillful enough to deal with that individual will see him as an asset and treat with him or her as an asset to support the system versus almost oppression, suppressing that individual and making the public the situation difficult. So that's how I see that situation.
But Ato, jump in.
Yeah.
Because I also wanted to speak to. I also would like you to speak to Brother Ato the concept, and I use that word purposefully. The concept of brain drain, especially when it comes to educating our potential sport leaders.
Okay. All right. So I want to say that I agree with Dr. Melville on many of those points made. I made a note just to preserve any whiteboard issues. So you asked a question, a very important question, I believe. And why that question to my mind is so important is because it is almost unanswerable in the absence of a definition of what success looks like. So you were saying, we are falling short. We have some professionals and whatever, but we're falling short. What is reaching there? Because in order for us to fall short, we need to have some understanding or definition of what is reaching there. There's a saying that Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about: if we don't, it is impossible to miss a goal that is not clearly defined. So, what are the goals we are setting? And only by setting clear goals and making that public, we can assess whether we are reaching there or not. So that's why Dr. Melville is saying we need to have that research parameter, that framework. So if we have clear objectives on what our goals are, we will know that we are missing. And then we can interrogate why we are missing. So the president of the Olympic Committee spoke about 24 goals by 2024. It is unlikely that we'll get there. We know we miss, but that is beautiful. Whether that is the goal we should have set, that's not my prerogative. That is his, because he's the president of the Olympic Committee. But at least he was brave enough to set a clear goal, and now we know we missed that goal, and we can interrogate why we missed that goal. On the subject of our students and the brain drain thing that you're asking about, I don't think that is a risk right now. We've been producing so many students, and you highlighted what is going on at UE as well, but I can't speak to that much either. I can speak to what's going on at UTT. We have a certificate in sports studies. We have a bachelor's in kinesiology. We have a master's in kinesiology, and we have a PhD that is run through the Office of Postgraduate Studies. So I don't think we are at risk of brain drain. What we may be at risk of is people becoming frustrated and changing careers, and when the decision makers, the policy makers, the people with power to make the change are ready to make the changes that are required, we may have to be retraining people or training a new batch of people because we're not using well the resources we have trained so far. And to the credit of the government, the government has invested in training these people, because a lot of the people trained benefited from GATE and other scholarship initiatives that I think were beautiful, but we we didn't plan thoroughly. We didn't plan what are we going to do with these people that receive what I think is good quality training. What are we going to do with them? How we're going to use them? And there is where I think we have a serious problem.
I sigh because this comment comes up. We do not have a sport industry in TNT, and to some extent, let's broaden it out to the Caribbean. Hence the reason why there are no jobs available to the university graduates. Thank you very much, Mr. Ryan, for that. Catherine John response was agreed, no jobs, only volunteer work. Given the recently read 2021 national budget, in its response, the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee's president said that there are a lot of opportunities given the new normal. Opportunities where graduates can fill, including sports medicine, and as you would have heard from the minister himself, sport tourism. Thus, there needs to be actors to fill these positions. With there being said by one of our commentators, Mr. Ryan, that there is no sport industry. Is it the egg or the chicken? Which one do we need to see about first? And staying in line with our main topic, sport and education. I know it's a loaded question, gentlemen. I know it is. Yeah. But I would like you all to take up the challenge in answering it, please.
Dr. Melville, you're muted. I would love to speak to that, but I would give my brother an opportunity first, if he likes.
And Jeffrey, what is the question? Sorry.
The question is, given the reading of the budget, the 2021 national budget, in its response, the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, Mr. Brian Lewis, said that there's a lot of opportunities. That's on one side. On the other hand, you have Mr. Gerard Ryan as one of our commentators on the chat saying that there's no sports industry in Trinidad and Tobago. We just spoke to the education system in terms of churning out students, right? Egg or the chicken? Sport industry, no sport industry, but there is a possibility of opportunities given the budget. Comments, remarks as regards to this that has been part of our conversation for years, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So Jeffrey, I've learned. I'm not too sure how long ago I learned this, but this is my experience. I try to speak to things that I can speak competently on. You know, to me, it really makes sense. So, and Brother Atto and myself, we had this conversation. Many disagreements takes place because lack of understanding of terminology, semantics. What do we mean? And it happens with, my interaction with people or whatever. Sometimes they are on the same point, but they don't understand the particular term that each person is actually having a conversation. Happens with my father all the time. So me and my father have that kind of dialogue all the time, right? So the sport industry, I'm not too certain what that means and exactly what the audience member is speaking to, and that is not my content area, and I'm not quite au fait with the literature as it relates to that. So I will leave that to my brother Atto or what have you, as it relates to the president of the Olympic Committee, indicating there are a lot of opportunities in the marketplace for jobs or whatever the case may be. The president may have done some research, right, and have gathered some data and may have identified a number of, maybe I could have that conversation and find out exactly, what are these jobs, where are these jobs, or whatever the case may be. And until I have that conversation, definitely I wouldn't be able to pronounce on it. So that is my input. I'm quite interested to hear my brother talk about the sport industry and how he conceives and conceptualized that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because just as you started to speak to it, but I'm going to allow you to chime in very much. I await your answer. Someone asked a question. Mr. Bernard Charles asks, how do we define sports industry? Very interesting question. Thank you very much, Mr. Charles, for your input. Watch me, guys. The chat is lighting up. Thank you very much to everybody who is making their remarks and comments. I really appreciate it.
But Arto really has that kind of infection thing with people. If you didn't know, I just let you know. He's quite infectious in the way how he operates. So I'm not quite surprised, Mr. Edward.
Well, but too.
Not at all. That is not true. But if he's serving that pie, I'll have a little slice. But that's not true.
It's like you're saying that, but Arto is a sweet man, I watch it, I find that have a little undertone in it, but Arto. But go ahead.
Yeah, good.
He means my diet has a lot of sugar in it. Anyway, so I believe. So let me speak to the Olympic Committee president. I'm very fond of his passion and energy, but I would have to say he's speaking from an oniric position, and or he's speaking about a futuristic state. But I am reasonably certain that there is not currently a proliferation of job opportunities available to people qualified in sport. I can say that without fear of successful refutation. The next thing was the matter of whether we have a sport. We clearly have a sport industry. For emphasis, people might say we don't have a sport industry. I understand what they mean. We do not have a vibrant, robust sport industry, and that is largely because we lack policy, we lack standard, we lack respect for sport as a profession. And I've been observing this anecdotally, so I have to declare the difference between what I'm reporting as evidentiary positions and what I'm reporting as casual opinions that are not rigorously scrutinized. But what I've observed is there's a disrespect of the profession of sport. And one of the things I'm seeing as a result of that disrespect is a certain arrogance of some professionals in sport. And it's a subconscious overcompensation. And again, I'm not a psychologist, so Dr. Melville may have to see if there's any validity in that hypothesis. Of course, I do not have evidence to support that position. It is just based on my observation. But what I want to say is that, and I try to say this as often as I can. One, I'm certain my colleagues at the academy must be tired of me by now, because I'm tired of myself, of saying that we need to sacrifice something and spend some time seeing how we can enhance the mechanics around the sport industry, how we can encourage and lobby and advocate for better policies. How can we encourage, advocate, and lobby for better standards? Because what is happening as well, students, people who are popular and have a decent physique are taking jobs that they're not necessarily qualified for away from people who are qualified to do these jobs. And that's because we don't have standards. You can't practice medicine in Trinidad and Tobago or law without a degree. You can't become a vet without a degree in veterinary medicine. You can't become an engineer without a degree, but somehow people can become a professional in sport without having the proper qualifications to do so. So those are some of the things I speak about when we talk about policies. Some of the other things I speak about when we talk about policies that might help to create a sporting industry, and I shared this with a minister in Guyana actually when I was fortunate enough to meet with him, is trying to give people incentives to participate in sporting activity. So giving people a tax refund for gyms. The government will not lose money on that because if and it has to be connected. Of course, these ideas are not good a priori. It is good if we do it well. And then, even if we think we have done it well, we don't just leave it alone. We have to scrutinize the outcomes. In other words, monitor and evaluate it to see what sort of returns we're deriving from that. So if we have a scheme like that, where more people will go to gym now because it's actually free, the government is paying for it because we will get a, a tax return from proving that we are gym members. And then gyms have a responsibility to show that people were there. So you need to ensure that there's a mechanism where you only get this tax return if you made 75% of attendance to the gym. And what is defined as 75% attendance? A minimum of 3 times per week. So if you make 2 times per week every week, that'll only be about 66%. So most weeks you have to make 3 times. And then you'll get that report from the gym, which we should make very easy to get. You submit that with your taxes and you get that tax return. That is not a loss to the government. That will incur savings because there is good body of evidence that suggests we derive a reduction in our health costs when our population is more physically active. There's a good body of evidence to suggest that there's a relationship between people who are physically active and having a better diet. It's not a one-to-one correlation, but there is some evidence that suggests that when we are more active, we tend to be more careful about the things we ingest because we are cognizant of the work we're putting in. We start to get into social groups that are more health conscious, etc., etc. So, and the last thing I want to say before I don't want to dominate this segment, but the last thing I want to say is we all have a part to play. I feel like I've been failing the sport industry in not producing enough research to help to change minds of decision makers. I feel that the decision makers have some blame to shoulder as well because they have access to some information and they're not acting on that information, probably because of the era they grew up in and the romanticism of what was, and I did it. That is the circumstances I came through, and I am all right. I found my physical activity, my way to physical activity other ways, and other people can find that way as well. So maybe for all those reasons, they're not investing the way they should in this industry. But and then the last thing they might say, or another thing they might say is, it is really difficult to figure that out. But since when it was okay for us to not do things just because it's difficult? We need to find a way to get it done. So to borrow the slogan from Nike, let's just do it. A little by little, but let's continue to agitate. Let's continue to do the research. Let's continue to engage these people and try to convince them that it's a wise investment. And of course, again, I'm not calling for a wholesale reformation, or no, reformation would not be wholesale, but a wholesale abolition of our current system. I'm calling for a transformation of our current system, starting with a small slice of our students. Build the body of evidence within our context to show that this works. It is working on a cognitive level, it's working on a physical level, it's working on a social level, etc., etc. A well-designed research project, pilot that, and then have the conversation again to see if the government believes the evidence is robust enough to at least, maybe in the first instance, expand the pilot before we do a transformation of the education system. And there are other models that exist in other places in the world.
Dr. Melville, I think you're onto something, because the amount of comments that came as Brother Atto was speaking, it was flowing, it was flowing. I mean, we just have Unuka Sukdeo saying, yes, Brother Atto, great points. Carlin Watson would have added, "You must be the change you wish to see in the world," by Mahatma Gandhi. As we speak about commentators, I want to wish one of our commentators to Futsal 868 Corner Talks, Mr. Karen Modest, the facility manager at the Maloney Indoor Sport Arena. Happy belated birthday, as he celebrated his birthday yesterday. Thank you very much for always being a part of Futsal 868 Corner Talks and for your contributions. And also, you were a guest on the show. I want to say that wish you many God's blessings. But also, continuing your point, Brother Atto, for those who are watching us, next week we speak to sport and human resource management. There's a reason we flowed, because as you realize, as we come into the end of this program, we are speaking to what's next. When somebody graduates, what happens? How can we fill the gap? How can we put them in places? What is the process, even when it comes to national governing bodies, national sporting organizations? So look out for that. Same time next week, sport and human resource management. But any which way, coming to coming back to sport and education, gentlemen, we are 1 hour and 27 minutes into this great program, into this great game where our spectators are shouting from the sidelines. What a wonderful job they're seeing with the gladiators in the ring. I would like you all to answer the question that we posed in our as part of our topic. Is sport part of education? And even to our viewers, you can answer it as well. Is sport part of education? And in your closing remarks, gentlemen, I would like you to sum up as best as you can all of the actors who are on this landscape, who share this landscape. Students, student athletes, parents, teachers, principals, policymakers, government and non-government organizations. So I start with you, Brother Atto, in your closing remarks to this that has been a great show, to the point whereby we have to do a part two. We have to. I want to put that plug in one time. We'll talk offline to be able to book it. We have to get a part two. This has been amazing, to say the least. Give us your closing remarks, Brother Atto.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you for, I really appreciate being in dialogue with both you and my dear brother, Dr. Melville. Before I give my closing remarks, we each invoked our fathers. I would also like to invoke my mother. Since you greeted our brother from Maloney, belated birthday, I would like to greet my mother a happy birthday in advance. Her birthday is next week, and I would like to greet my daughter a happy birthday in advance as well. And one of my Trini mothers, her birthday is next week as well. So I greet them all happy birthdays in advance. In terms of my closing remark, I want to, whenever I engage in these kinds of conversations, I may come across contentious, but I try to be as measured as I possibly can without losing the passion that I have for human beings. And I believe we are doing a disservice to our human experience on this earth when we don't provide or at least explore what is best for our people. And I'm convicted that the current state of our education is not what's best for our people. The question is sport a part of education? I would like to use another word about physical activity and understanding of managing physical health. That is what we should be including in our curriculum. It is there to some extent. It is not enough. It is not done in the way that would derive the maximum benefit. And that is a frustration. And if I have opportunities to give talks at schools to help to convince teachers to spend more time doing physical education. I'm willing to do things like that. There's a lot of research that shows the benefits that can be derived, even if your goal is still narrowly focused on linguistic and logistic and logical intelligence. There is a good body of robust research that talks about and I'm sorry we didn't get to talk about this with Dr. Melville, brain derived neurotrophic factor that helps people to perform better academically, of course, if done in the correct way. So don't take them to exhaustion, but do it in a way that causes the maximization of that release, that chemical release. So I think it's difficult to make a case for why governments have not been, or all stakeholders have not been making a better investment in ensuring that there's a comprehensive and properly constructed and implemented sport for development, physical activity, and physical literacy program available to our children from early childhood education all the way to university. It is just as important, if not more so, than math, English, science, physics, etc., etc. And it does not take away from those subjects. It does not at all. And the last thing I want to say is if you look at some of the quote unquote better secondary schools in this country, their curriculum is closer to what the Greeks would have called paideia back in the day. The lower schools have less opportunities to engage in this necessary physical education program, and that is a tragedy.
Dr. Melville, before you respond, I just want to put a serious plug into what Brother Atto said. I had the privilege to attend Presentation College San Fernando. I repeated at Shigona Senior Comprehensive, and I went on to do A-levels at St. Mary's College. So I can be used as a statistic, I can be used as a case study. And what you're saying is quite correct. At Presentation College San Fernando, the only facility we didn't have at the time was a swimming pool. At the time. But because of the past students, we were closely affiliated to the Petrotrans swimming pool. And we had national athletes cycling, badminton, squash, cricket, football in my 5 years of being there, even multiple discipline sport national athletes. Because I was the southern mecca of boys' schools, there was a squash court, the only one in the Caribbean. There were 2 tennis courts, 2 football fields, one on campus and one off of campus, a hall where you could play badminton. You also could have played cricket, etc., etc., etc. And going up Port of Spain, we all know St. Mary's College in terms of the swimming pool, a beautiful sporting facility, and that are known as the grounds. And you had you also had basketball. But as well, Prez also had basketball that was open to the community, because in the afternoon, the community used to come and play basketball there as well. And you made a very interesting and important point, because Brother Michael Samuel was very much in tune with the student athlete, but not just the student athlete, because he saw every single student as an athlete. And given the facilities that he provided, many persons who entered into the halls of Presentation College San Fernando never thought that they would have been national athletes, but they did. They did. So you were spot on what it is you said. And we need to be able to do much more when it comes to that. Dr. Melville, your closing remarks, sir.
And so before I answer your specific question, is sport part of education, I will just create some agitation in your response and your response to Brother Atto also. So those of us who appreciate maybe a little bit, maybe some of us who understand research maybe just a little bit, they will ask, right, and create some agitation in response and ask if we control for all the other external variables beyond that, whether it's the principal, the school, the teachers, the parents, if we control for those variables, and they might we have found a different results or what have you. That's an interesting comment to make. But to answer your particular question, is sport part of education? So as far as we know, we are really a summary of our experiences of it. That's why two children would grow up in a house and they will be different. They have different mindset, different philosophy, see things, and sometimes people look, but they grow up in the same world, they're different, however, because they don't have the same mind and they don't perceive. So when they get sensation, they don't perceive things the same way. They don't have same emotional response, and they are conditioned differently, or whatever the case may be. So we believe that we are really a summary of our experiences, and we also believe that sport has some visceral and intrinsic value where it attracts individuals, and there's something about sport that attracts individual. I personally believe it's operate through the dopaminergic. I probably butcher it, but yeah, I probably butcher it, yeah, but it's really the dopamine neural system or whatever. So we get that flash of dopamine, not from a pleasure perspective, but from a craving perspective, in order to reduce the amount of quote unquote pain that we experience. So we always attract. So there's something about sports as it relates, it attracts the whole world or what have you. So it's visceral, it's intrinsic or what have you. And because of that, and there are some external values that can be achieved, some virtues that can be achieved, definitely. Sports should be part of the education system, however. And that is not really a question. I think that is really debated across different hemispheres in the world. And my last comment is, there's and this is going to create some agitation also. It's a loaded comment. The father of the nation is really a loaded comment. Some people may not agree with that, right? So it could create some agitation, right? He also, apart from saying the future of the nation is in the children's school bag, he also said post-independence, very shortly after independence, he also said there is a need for proper physical education programs in the school, which was just about 1963 or whatever, very early or whatever. So he too, father of the nation, I could take out him being father of the nation, because that would create problems. If I put father of the nations in a survey, people may respond differently just by having that there, because they wouldn't answer the question. They will ask that particular issue that I put there, but I purposely put it there to create agitation. Sometimes I do that, but I have to know that as well. But the point that I'm really making is that, for early in our history as a very young population, our father indicated very early that the need for physical education and sport in the education. And I am a quite supporter, adherent, proponent of that particular perspective as well.
Gentlemen, before we close off, I just want to take, as we would have posed that third question to our audience, I just want to read a couple of their comments. Ashton Rogers said, sport is a critical part of holistic education. Gerard Dionarine said, an industry defined a branch of economic or commercial activity. In a state-dependent society like TNT, government alone cannot invest in sport if you want to have a viable sport industry. Just want to recognize Mr. Rockcliffe's, Brother Atto's sending out of good wishes. Joanne Payne said, thank you very much for the wishes. Unako Sukdeo said, definitely sport is absolutely important factor in education. Within sports, there are many benefits that helps individuals to become better persons in society. Ashton Rogers said, agreed, physical activity boosts the physiological brain health and cognition. It may be continued. It may be a good idea to make a requirement for school principals to have a certificate. Now you're tilling up the pot a little bit more. We already in extra time here, Ashton. We don't want to go too much into it, right? But I want to say thank you very much, gentlemen. It has been an utmost pleasure. You have really hit this out of the park. And also, you have, I can't wait for next week because you all are passing on the baton to sport and human resource management in terms of what next. When you leave that classroom, what next? So on behalf of the Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, to my boat brothers, my newfound brothers, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, and we definitely have to have a call this week to have further discussion of how Futsal Association of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, all of our members can be a part of the initiatives that you all are speaking to and doing. And we wish you and your families God's richest blessings now and in the future. Have a great one, gents.
Thank you, brother.
Blessings, Flo.
Blessings, man.
So that was another episode of Futsal 868 Corner Talks. I have a little shout out here. I had to do this one personally, a personal shout out from my mother, Gloria Harrison Phillips Edwards, who said, Daddy said, great discussion. Once I make my parents proud, I'm happy. And I certainly did. So it is a blessing to be able to do such. And with that being said, I want to say thank you very much to everyone who joined in. To our guests, it has been an utmost pleasure. To our guests who you all in the studio, still stay in the studio, don't leave. Speak to you all offline just now. Thank you very much. See you all next week on another episode of Futsal 868 Corner Talks, where we speak to sport and human resource management. But also, as I keep saying, please go and subscribe to our Futsal 868 YouTube channel. See you all next week. Bye-bye.
Storyblocks Audio.